When we jump into Black Ops 4 and want to do well in multiplayer, chances are we'll gravitate around a few weapons, those obviously being the most powerful weapons and oftentimes the most versatile weapons out of the bunch. Things like the Maddox come to mind, things like the SOG 9mm, things like even the Vapor can have at times very good properties to it, but what about the weapons that are just downright bad? Because while Black Ops 4 may offer a lot more in terms of balancing across the board for situational weapons, i.e. minus the fact that rifles kind of dominate this game, a lot of the rifles going head to head really work just about evenly. A lot of the SMGs work evenly amongst the SMG category. And so there are a lot of weapons that really are counters to themselves or formidable weapons in certain situations, but there are ones that are just not that great. So I took to Twitter a couple of weeks ago and asked you guys what you thought the most underwhelming or perhaps just the downright worst weapons in Black Ops 4 were, and I got a ton of responses, probably a lot more than I anticipated, and some weapons that realistically I didn't realize had almost no mass appeal. So today we're gonna be talking about perhaps the 5 worst weapons within Call of Duty Black Ops 4 at the moment in their vanilla states. So that said, if you guys wanna get in on more things like this, feel free to follow me over on Twitter. It's always linked in the description below. Sometimes love to poll you guys here and get your feedback so that we can kind of do communal videos like this, but without further ado, let's just jump into it. The first one we'll talk about here is a sniper rifle, which is a very situational class to begin with, but the Outlaw Sniper is perhaps one of my least favorite weapons within Black Ops 4, and statistically, that'll back up my feeling on it as well. Even though recently it ended up getting a buff from a base damage of 120 to 140, which means theoretically you should be closer to a one-hit kill, you still get hit markers galore. Anything that is mid-chest or lower is still going to grant you a hit marker if the player is at full HP, or if they are even boosted from the TAC 5 with Crash, so they have 200 HP. So this thing is just a hit marker machine. If you end up getting a headshot, it sure still is a one-shot kill, but for the most part, it feels like a BB gun half the time. Sure, it boasts a little bit more mobility, and also it boasts a faster fire rate than some of the other weapons, i.e. the Paladin, which is probably still the kingfish here out of the sniper rifle category, and as for the Koshka, it's faster than that as well. But the Outlaw, in terms of just general usability, does not stack up well against other sniper rifles in its classification, and being that it's such a situational weapon to begin with, I wouldn't really want to take it into many close quarters gunfights either. So unless you're somebody that has that quick draw snap aim right to the head, you're probably gonna have a little bit of a tough time here at this, and anybody that's gone for gold on this can probably attest to that. Next up on the list, we're gonna talk about a secondary, and yes, I know a secondary shouldn't be as good as a primary, but it's one that when you think about it and you look at some of the actual gameplay tests, well, it's just not that great to begin with. That is the MOG 12. This a shotgun, yes, it is something that shotguns were nerfed to all hell and back within Black Ops 4 by being placed in the secondary category. You still can do well with the SG-12, you can still do well with something of the MOG 12 that has attachments on it, and with maybe even the operator mod of the Dragon's Breath, but when you take a look at it in its vanilla state, it is nowhere near anything that is ideal. When you go into a combat situation with a MOG 12, obviously a shotgun is more so suited for close quarters combat, but even when you get in the face of somebody in core, there's still a very real possibility that you're going to end up getting a hit marker. Even just a few meters away from a player in game, upper chest and headshots will still yield a hit marker, which is kind of baffling when you think about it. Now, of course, this and all the other weapons here that we'll talk about can absolutely shred within hardcore because you're guaranteed a 2-hit kill no matter what, but the shotguns for players that may be going for camos with this or trying to end up completing any challenges regarding it, you're gonna have a very tough time, and even if you just want to change up your gameplay at all and don't really want to use the weapons you normally do, I'd still put the MOG 12 probably on the lowest portion of that list. Next up, we're coming in with the SDM sniper rifle, another in the sniper classification. Right now it is a real full tilt in the sniper classification. Paladin definitely being that number 1, which is the default sniper. The king of the snipers, the Koshka, not necessarily still the greatest, it's still way better than the SDM and the Outlaw, but once you try and experiment around with the snipers outside of that, it just becomes a pain. Granted, this is something that, say, in Blackout is fantastic and can be a real pain in the butt for somebody that is going up against it and being pinned down by an SDM. In core and as a vanilla weapon within multiplayer, it's just not something that I would actively go out of my way to try and use. The fire rate as a semi-auto is actually not half bad, but the recoil and the center speed and also the mobility with the weapon itself on the base vanilla vanilla version of it just is not anything that's too practical. Granted, you could throw on some attachments that will make it a little bit better, but when you take a look at just all the competition within the sniper classification, or even if you just want to go up against something that you want to pop on iron sights or a dual zoom or holographic that allow you to have a more so medium to close range engagement on it, it can be a little bit better, but for that base vanilla version of the weapon, it's not suited for anything outside of longer range, and if you don't hit that headshot, chances are if they're moving even the slightest, that recoil will knock your aim off just enough to either make you miss that second shot or make it a lot tougher than lining up the first. So unfortunately, for as far as snipers go, it's not the most practical choice. Again, if you're going for challenges or anything like that I've had to do, it is something that you can manage with attachments, but in terms of just overall usability, versatility of the weapon, and overall effectiveness, I'd choose many, many more weapons over it. The next two weapons we're getting into are really actually some eye-openers for me personally whenever I took a look at your feedback over on the tweet talking about this that stirred this conversation. This first one being the Spitfire. I remembered in Black Ops 4's beta, the Spitfire was absolutely ridiculous. Having looked at it in Blackout as of recently, that's pretty solid. They did some different changes to the weapon and how it worked over there as compared to multiplayer. It's a completely different beast. Over in Blackout, it has almost no recoil now, which is kind of insane when you think about the weapon itself and how fast it can shred through either armor or anything like that. But in multiplayer, it's a completely different world compared to either Blackout or what we saw in the beta. With this, the Spitfire itself is not suited for anything outside of close quarters combat. That makes sense given an SMG, but when we talk about it, you think SMGs will have at least a little bit of range on it. Spitfire, not so much. That's something that recoil throws that off and becomes an almost unusable weapon outside of close range or even into slightly mid-range combat. You'll see in the gameplay that you're watching right now, and even with some of the other footage that you'll see, we might have some streaks or some good clips or anything like that, but this is really only because I was playing around B, just playing Ring Around the Rosie essentially, and taking those gunfights up close and personal. That's the only reason that I really thrived well with this in recent games, and I actually hadn't ranked up the Spitfire all that much before this, so it was something I was using the vanilla weapon like we've been talking about the base versions of all these weapons so far. The Spitfire, of course, with that operator mod makes it even crazier with that fire rate, so recoil is just amplified even more. So once you end up getting up to that wildfire attachment, that's something that is a give or take for you, but with attachments on this, it can get, of course, better as with all other weapons, but from that initial fire rate, the ammo in the default mag, and also just the range and recoil, it makes it less than ideal, and a lot of the SMGs I'd say are less than ideal, but the Spitfire in particular, definitely up there in my category after reviewing it a little further. And the final weapon we'll talk about here, again, is kind of an eye-opener when I take a look back and really see how it stacks up against other weapons, either in its classification or just in general, suited for overall combat. That being the ABR-223, and this one, again, kind of breaks my heart if I'm honest with you, because I absolutely loved this thing. It was my go-to within the Black Ops 4 multiplayer beta a couple months back. When the game finally launched, I kind of went on to do some different challenges for camos and didn't really get around to the ABR all that much until as of recently. But it is definitely something that's been, with even some recent adjustments, not as great as it was in the beta, and certainly not compared to other weapons. The adjustment to the delay between bursts has made it even worse than it has been before, and then also with the nerf to the operator mod, that's something that, even if you get up to that, next excluding the discussion about the base weapon itself, it's just less than ideal. The optic on the weapon as its base sight is just pure ugly to me. I don't like this thing at all. The first thing I did whenever I ranked it up even slightly was toss on a reflex sight here for it. Of course, ELO is still my preferred, but the base optic on it is clunky. The delay between bursts is a little too slow for my liking. The damage seems less than optimal, and it seems like it takes 3 to 4 to 5 bursts to end up getting a kill, even if it's in the upper chest. And then you have things like the ammo count and how fast you burn through those bullets. You only end up having 3 mags with the base ammo granted, and unless you have scavenger and or crash, you're not going to get more ammo throughout your life. So a 3-burst weapon taking about 4 to 5 bursts to end up getting a kill depending on where you hit a player, that's half a magazine gone right there. You're at the most going to get 6 kills without picking up any extra additional ammunition. And so it's just something that when you take a look at it from a top-down perspective, the ABR starts to become a candidate for that weapon that I would be okay with not using all that much. But ultimately, I think that's where we're going to wrap up this list. And again, thank you guys for taking part part in it. I had a ton of fun polling you guys over on Twitter, getting your thoughts, because some of these weapons that I initially already had in my mind, I kind of thought I was crazy and I was the only one that thought this way about some of these weapons, but seeing your reactions and feedback as well is interesting to see the communal response here to the just overall weaponry within Black Ops 4. Again, like I said at the beginning of the video, I think that a lot of the weapons are actually very balanced and very in line for their specific categories. Granted, I'd still love to see a little bit more SMG play and rifles maybe not being so dominant compared to every other classification, but on a micro scale, when you take a look at the rifles, they're all really in line. SMGs, they're all really in line. Snipers, well, you know, that's a different story, but LMGs, they're really all in line, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of things here that I think in between each individual weapon classification can do well, but overall from a top-down perspective, these ones take the cake for what I think right now are probably some of the worst weapons, and it seems like you guys seem to agree over on Twitter. But that said, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I know my audience here on YouTube is way wider than that on Twitter, so if you guys disagree, feel free to let me know your thoughts on what you think the worst weapons are within Black Ops 4. Anything that you guys would like to add on or maybe take away from this list, don't hesitate. Let me know in the comments. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to drop a like down below, and of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Black Ops 4, multiplayer, Blackout, zombies, you name it, we got you covered with the best of updates, news, information, tips, tricks, best class setups, all that good stuff. We got you covered on the channel. So if any of that interests you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing. If you guys also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, those links are down there in the description below. And also if you want to follow me over on Twitter, we can do some more things like this, poll you guys and do some more communal videos. I think that'd be cool to end up doing. So follow me on those links in the description below. Also follow my Twitch channel down there in the description below as well. Gonna be starting to stream a lot more here in the very near future and probably gonna be doing so over there. But that said, hopefully you guys have a fantastic day. Thanks so much for watching. Mine has been Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.